J. Edgar Hoover was the first director of the FBI. He held that position for 48 years, the longest-serving director of the FBI. Now, due to his longevity as director, Hoover allegedly compiled dossiers on American citizens he felt a danger and a threat to the country. Now, such luminaries as President Kennedy had a file, starting back during World War II, when he was single and dating a female correspondent by the name of Ingrid Arvid, allegedly a Nazi spy. She was not. Hoover's confidential files allegedly ranged from prominent politicians to Hollywood celebrities, working-class union organizers to civil rights workers. If you were in the public eye and Hoover thought you were a danger to the country, a confidential file was opened on you, allegedly. Hoover's rise to power started innocently enough. At the age of 18, he was hired as a clerk for the Library of Congress. The website Internet Archive states, in a 1951 letter referencing the former position, Hoover wrote, "This job trained me in the value of collating material. It gave me an excellent foundation for my work in the FBI, where it has been necessary to collate information and evidence." Now, while working at the Library of Congress, Hoover attended George Washington University Law School. He earned his law degree in 1917. When America declared war on Germany, Hoover, with a law degree in hand, applied for and was accepted as a clerk in the Justice Department's War Emergency Division. Now, this position automatically exempted him from the draft. Hoover quickly moved up the bureaucratic ladder and was appointed head of the division's Alien Enemy Bureau. He oversaw the arrest and incarceration of allegedly disloyal foreigners without trial. There were a total of 1,400 suspicious Germans living in the U.S., and the Bureau arrested 98 and designated 1,100 as arrestable. He was able to get away with the denial of due process because Congress had passed, upon President Wilson's urging, the 1917 Espionage Act. This act prohibited interference with military operations or recruitment to prevent insubordination in the military and to prevent the support of United States enemies during wartime. Although it has been updated and modified, this act is still on the books today. President Wilson, seeing the need to stop any kind of disloyal behavior, pushed Congress to pass the Alien and Sedition Act in May of 1918. It's a set of amendments to the Espionage Act, which prohibited many forms of speech, including any disloyal, profane, scurrilous, or abusive language about the form of government of the United States, or the flag of the United States, or the uniform of the Army and Navy. These two acts effectively suppressed civil liberties during wartime. On November 11th at 11 a.m., an armistice was signed with Germany in 1918. The fighting stopped. However, until a peace treaty was signed, technically the USA was still at war with Germany and a reality that Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer and J. Edgar Hoover would exploit to remove all the radicals from the country. Now, as far back as 1915, President Wilson believed there was a growing group of Americans who were disloyal to the country. President Wilson in 1915's annual message to Congress, in which he calls out disloyal Americans. He, quote, "There are citizens of the United States, I blush to admit, born under other flags, but welcomed under our generous naturalization laws to the full freedom and opportunity of America, who have poured the poison of disloyalty into the very arteries of our national life, who have sought to bring the authority and good name of our government into contempt, to destroy our industries wherever they thought it effective for their vindictive purposes to strike at them, and to debase our politics to the use of foreign intrigue. A little while ago, such a thing would have seemed incredible, because it was incredible. We made no preparation for it. We have been almost ashamed to prepare for it, as if we were suspicious of ourselves and our own comrades and neighbors. But the ugly and incredible thing has actually come about, and we are without adequate federal laws to deal with it. I urge you to enact such laws at the earliest possible moment, and feel that in doing so, I am urging you to do nothing less than save the honor and self-respect of the nation. Such creatures of passion, disloyalty, and anarchy must be crushed." In April of 1919, anarchist bombs sent through the mail to the country's most prominent politicians and business leaders were discovered. The bombs were timed to reach their designated target on May 1st, 1919. A total of 28 bombs were found. One of the bombs, mailed to former Senator Hardwick of Georgia, did go off. The bomb blew off the hands of his maid and injured his wife. The Evening Capital News of Boise, Idaho, May 1st, 1919 edition stated that 17 bombs had been held up at the post office in New York because of insufficient postage. Now, the next set of bombs to go off were on June 2nd, 1919. The anarchists were able to detonate 9 bombs, more deadly and powerful than the previous bombs mailed in April. Now, they did this in 8 cities throughout the country. All the targets were prominent political leaders, judges, and businessmen who were against the rising tide of Bolshevism in America and anti-immigrant. Luckily, these 9 bombs did not kill their respective targets, although one innocent New York night watchman was killed by the name of William Bonner, and one of the bombers was also killed. It was the anarchist bomber Carlo Valdinucci, assigned to kill Attorney General Mitchell Palmer, who also had been on the April list of targets. The bomb dated prematurely. Valdinucci instantly sending body parts all over the surrounding area. Assistant Secretary of the Navy Franklin Roosevelt's out was across the street from Palmer's, and one of the bomber's body parts landed on Roosevelt's front step. Talk about special delivery. To these bombings and the general labor unrest in the country that A. Mitchell Palmer created the General Intelligence Division of the Bureau of Investigation in August of 1919. Now, the head of this new division was 24-year-old J. Edgar Hoover. Now, using the Alien and Sedition Act of May 1918 that I talked about before, the General Intelligence Division, also known as the Radical Squad, began monitoring U.S. radicals with the intent to punish, arrest, or deport any of those whose politics he, Hoover, decided was dangerous. Future Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter was targeted by Hoover and the Radical Squad. Hoover and his squad, under the color of law, began opening people's mails, surveilling suspected Reds, getting mailing lists from the anarchist groups, and without any due process, they began to hunt them down. To be on Hoover's list meant you were in trouble. The first raids of the Radical Squad was on November 7th, 1919, against the Union of Russian Workers. The raid took place in 12 cities. The date of the raid was picked because that was the anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia. The headlines of the Pensacola Journal for November 8, 1919 was, "Deportation of Radicals Ordered." The article went on to explain where and how the raids took place. Quote, Bridgeport, Connecticut, November 8th. 60 alleged radicals were arrested here tonight in raids by agents of the Department of Justice, aided by local police. Most of the prisoners were taken from the boarding houses on the east side and were brought to the city court chambers to be examined. Now, the New York Evening World's headlines for that day said, "Reds in U.S. plotted revolution, deportation for all radicals," close quotes. The paper then went on to report that the Reds were organized to resist any attack made by police during their demonstration at Rutgers Field that afternoon. The police had orders from Police Commissioner Enright to use their nightsticks if needed. They used them freely, said the reporter. No chance was given to the Red Guard to carry out the orders given them. The effects of the police nightsticks was shown in the appearance of the battered group, which was headed for Ellis Island. Now, the people arrested that night, 249 were found to be undesirables and deportation orders were issued. They were sent to Ellis Island, where on December 21st, 1919, they were marched aboard the Army transport ship Buford and sailed to Russia. The Washington Herald, December 22nd edition, tells the story of the deportation. Clad Marines at the rail of the Soviet Ark. Emma Goldman, the high priestess of anarchy, shouted, "This is the beginning of the end of the United States. I shall be back in America. We shall all be back. I am proud to be among the first deported." The Tsar, in all his career, never treated his subjects as we are being treated today. Alexander Berkman, another anarchist with a high profile, stated his intentions to go to Petrograd and work with Lenin and Trotsky. He went on to say, the majority of the party sailing on the Burford were poor, ignorant souls who knew nothing of the doctrines of anarchy. He added, he proposed to instruct them in their doctrine during the voyage. Now, as far as Congress and the American people were concerned, the raids of November 8th were a success. Attorney General Palmer had saved America from the immigrant threat of radical elements trying to overthrow the government with force. Palmer now had a blank check to do what needed to be done to protect America and America's civil liberties, even if it meant denying some radicals their civil liberties. Palmer raids began in earnest in January 1920. However, it was not A. Mitchell Palmer who planned the raids throughout November and December. Palmer was busy handling the United Workers' mine strike. The raids were planned and executed by J. Edgar Hoover. Since the U.S. is still technically at war with Germany, Hoover used the Alien and Sedition Act to legitimize his raids of January 2nd, 1920. Now, on January 3rd, the 1920 edition of the New York Times Tribune described the raids in New York City. Within an hour after the raiders had left Mr. Flynn's office, Chief of the Department's Bureau of Investigation at 15 Park Row, an army of trucks and automobiles, they reported that about 800 of whom arrest warrants have been issued, 400 have been taken into custody. Mr. Flynn said the number taken into custody would exceed 800. The article continued with a description of how the raids were carried out. Plans for the raid had been in preparation for more than a month. Printed instructions sent from Washington were read to each raider. They were specified that no violence was to be used. Squads of agents were sent to each place designated for a raid so that all the raids would take place simultaneously. Promptly at 8:30 o'clock, each squad walked into the place appointed for the scene of action. All the occupants of the place were lined up against the wall and searched. They were then escorted to an army truck and taken to the Justice Department headquarters in Park Row. Now, if you were an American citizen caught in these raids, you were turned over to the local authorities for further investigation. If you were an alien, you were sent to Ellis Island to await deportation. Now, the website history.com describes these raids conducted on January 2nd, 1920 in a somewhat different light. On January 2nd, Justice Department agents conducted raids in 33 cities, resulting in the arrest of 3,000 people. Over 800 of the arrested suspect radicals were living in the Boston area. The article goes on to say, abuse of arrestees were routine. In Detroit, nearly 1,000 men were detained and starved for almost a week in a small area without windows on the top floor of the federal building. They were later transferred to Fort Wayne to be tortured during questioning. Family members of the prisoners were assaulted in front of them as part of the interrogation. Now, not all government officials supported Attorney General Palmer. On January 24, 1920 edition of the Wilmington, Delaware Evening Journal, U.S. Attorney for the Eastern Pennsylvania District, Francis Fisher Kane, is quoted from his resignation letter to President Wilson. I am obliged to take this step because I feel out of sympathy with the anti-radical policies of Mr. Palmer and his methods of carrying them out. I am strongly opposed to the wholesale raiding of aliens that is being carried out throughout the country with the view of putting through deportation under the Act of October 16, 1918. To my mind, this policy is both unwise and unjust. Kane went on to protest a new espionage act proposed by A.G. Palmer that would lead to an entirely unnecessary repression of free speech and the interference with the liberty of the press. I could not consciously and wholeheartedly take part in this enforcement of such a law. By early March, the tide was turning against Palmer and his unconstitutional ways. Acting Secretary of Labor Louis Freeland Post, who was also in charge of the Bureau of Immigration, reviewed the backlog of deportation orders. By April 10th, Post had reviewed a backlog of 1,600 cases. He dismissed 71% of them. Some had been held for as long as 2 months for having attended a meeting of a radical group. Post determined that aliens were entitled to a fair hearing, which was contrary to the position of the Board of Immigration, which held that immigrants were not subject to constitutional safeguards. Now, overall, Post is credited with preventing many deportations and freeing many innocent people. Palmer justified his action by claiming a massive red uprising would take place on May 1st, 1920. He based this assumption on intelligence gathered by Hoover and his General Intelligence Division. However, no uprising occurred. That very same month, a group of 12 prominent lawyers, among them were Francis Fisher Kane and future Supreme Court Justice Felix Frankfurter, published Report upon the Illegal Practices of the United States Department of Justice. And in the opening paragraph, they stated, to the American people, for more than 6 months, we, the undersigned lawyers, whose sworn duty it is to uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States, have seen with growing apprehension the continued violation of that Constitution and breaking of those laws by the Department of Justice of the United States government, under the guise of a campaign for the suppression of radical activities. The Office of the Attorney General, acting by its local agents throughout the country and giving express instructions from Washington, has committed continued illegal acts. Wholesale arrests, both of aliens and citizens, have been made without warrants or any process of law. Men and women have been jailed and held incommunicado without access of friends or counsel. Homes have been entered without search warrants, property seized and removed. Other property has been wantonly destroyed. Working men and working women suspected of radical views have been shamefully abused and mistreated. Politically, Palmer was done. Any aspirations he had for the presidency turned into ash that day. His protege, Hoover, got away with clean hands, though. 4 years later, the former 18-year-old file clerk in the Library of Congress, would be appointed at the age of 29 director of the Bureau of Investigation, and then subsequently the director of the FBI, by none other than Attorney General Harland F. Stone, a future Supreme Court Associate Justice and future Chief Justice. Hoover would serve the next 48 years as director of the FBI. Using his skills he learned at the Library of Congress and the power base he created with his FBI, he was able to keep tabs on every important politician, civil rights leader, celebrity union leader, or anybody he felt was a danger to the country. It has been allegedly stated that when Hoover reached mandatory retirement age, Lyndon Johnson was forced to appoint Hoover director of the FBI for life because Hoover had a file on Johnson. Now, did Hoover have secret files on people in power? Doesn't really matter. Just the belief he had those files gave Hoover immense power over presidents, senators, representatives, anyone he needed to push his agenda forward. An interesting side note, both Emma Goldman and Alexander Brinkman became disillusioned with Soviet Russia and left in December of 1921. Brinkman went to Berlin to write pamphlets on the revolution. They were the Russian tragedy, the Russian Revolution, and the Communist Party, and their constant rebellion. He also wrote the book, The Bolshevik Myth. Now, he committed suicide in Nice, France in 1936. Emma Goldman, with the help of Brinkman, wrote My Disillusionment in Russia and My Further Disillusionment in Russia. Now, she died of a stroke on May 14, 1940 in Toronto, Canada. Well, I hope you liked this video. This is our history and this is our heritage. Now, I want to thank you for taking the time to watch my video. If you liked it, please ring the bell and subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to leave a comment below. Thank you very much.